Welcome back to our very special edition of the Beaufort News. Of course, we're focusing on Memorial Day, and I'm thrilled and honored to have with us our mayor, Billy Keyserling. Billy, how are you?
Thanks, I'm great, thanks.
Great. Billy,
thank you for having me.
Oh, very happy to have you. Billy, you have been in Beaufort. You are an institution. You know some of the history of Memorial Day as it's been celebrated in town. Can you tell us some about that?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. When at the National Cemetery, there's a ceremony after the parade. And someone asked me many years ago, why are there more African Americans than Caucasians there? And I said, well, it's too bad, because we're there to celebrate the many veterans who gave their lives for our country. But it's deeply rooted in African American history. During the Civil War, there were a number of African Americans and Union soldiers who were in a prison in Charleston. And when they died, they were put into a mass grave. And in May of 1865, the leadership went and they essentially dug it up and buried them individually. Had a big parade with military honors and lots of school children. And the children all went with wreaths of flowers, and they laid them on the graves, and they called it Decoration Day. So it has morphed into Memorial Day. But it's really comes from the African American tradition of decorating the graves on that one day in memory of those who were lost. When I was a child, Boundary Street would be lined with vendors. It was almost like a big celebration. There was food, there were families, there were picnics, there were games for the children. And so after the service, people would gather along the street, and now there's still a community barbecue to which people are invited at one of the funeral homes. It was very special. Not long after I returned to Beaufort, in I think it was 1988-89, some of the remains of Union African American soldiers were found again up near Charleston, Folly Beach, I believe it was. And there was a big ceremony with a reenactment where they actually posthumously buried the former black
soldiers.
Massachusetts 54th. Governor Dukakis was there, and there were a number of state legislators from here and there. And it was a beautiful ceremony with a parade through town with military honors, and they went to the National Cemetery, which of course is Civil War vintage.
Billy and I do share some roots. I grew up just outside Boston. Billy, you spent some time there. And of course, we always honored the 54th Massachusetts up in Boston. We're so proud of them, our first black soldiers in our United States military. Of course, the film Glory is very, very popular, has Denzel Washington.
That's right. This was right after the film came out, and a lot of the uniform equipment that were used during that celebration were actually from the film.
I like the second use.
So, you know, it's just, we ought to get the perspective on it. It has changed. It's a holiday for all of us. It's a day to stop and to reflect upon the many men and women who've served our country, and certainly those who were lost in harm's way, but those who are buried in that cemetery by right as veterans.
Billy, so much of what I learned about Beaufort comes from going on one of the carriage tours. And one of the things I've always kind of longed for is more information about our role in the Civil War. What I understand is that Beaufort relatively quickly went to the Union. I'm not sure there was a lot of motivation.
We were pretty passive.
Yeah.
There was the Battle of Port Royal Sound, which was the largest at sea military battle, I think, in history, U.S. history.
Wow.
But it passed pretty quickly. The Union forces came in and moved their way. And as they came into Beaufort, most of the planters, the leadership in Beaufort all basically left. They abandoned their slaves. And as you know, Reconstruction actually started in 1861 at the beginning of the war, which is part of a unique history that makes Beaufort's Civil War history, but it's bigger history, unique. There's no other place in the world where, and they didn't know, I've been reading about it recently, because I'd like to have a museum about the period of history called Reconstruction.
Absolutely.
Because that's where modern America began. That's where we shed the burden of slavery. That's something that is
it's very special.
Very, very, very special.
If you walk the point, you just feel the rich history of that area. And
But to your question, it was very passive in Beaufort. Many of the big homes were used as hospitals,
Right, I've heard that.
offices. General Sherman stayed in Beaufort at the Cuthbert House Inn. You could stand today on the steps of what we call the federal courthouse, which was the county courthouse, and you can see with a little imagination. You can see the Battle of Port Royal if you sort of look around Parris Island to St. Helena Sound. You can see the Emancipation Tree at the Naval Hospital, where the Emancipation Proclamation was read.
Oh, beautiful.
If you imagine right around the corner, there's a secession house where they negotiated some of the articles of secession. With your imagination, you can see St. Helena Island, where Penn Center, the first school for freed slaves, began. So, and that didn't happen anywhere. And the transition into freedom, because one of the things is that early in the war, nobody thought what they were going to do with the contraband. And the contraband was slaves, and the other part of the contraband, of course, was cotton. And among the missionaries who went down, came down from Boston and New York, they ended up quarreling with each other. And one of the issues is, what do you do with the cotton and what do you do with the slaves? There was one school that wanted to take the cotton up north to process it. The other school said, well, we need to
Keep it local.
we need to keep it local to give the slaves some work. So there was an argument about, what do you do with the slaves, what do you do with the cotton? Finally, the Unitarians and the Quakers came in, and they started Penn Center, which of course is a
Treasure.
standing monument to that period of history that happened only in Beaufort.
Well,
As you moved further into history, the time of when Pitchfork Ben Tillman had been governor and went to the United States Senate, and they passed the Constitution of, I think it was 1893, maybe 1895, that essentially took away the rights of blacks.
Yeah, very dark time in our history.
There was a
the
movement.
Jim Crow era.
The Jim Crow era. But people in Beaufort, black and white, came together and said, do we really have to go that far backwards? Can't we hold what we've got? Let's learn to share power, let's learn to share business, let's learn to work together. And it lasted a little while, but it finally faded, and Jim Crow came through, and the rest is history.
Billy, I can't wait to hear more about this rich history. We will take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with our wonderful mayor, Billy Keyserling. Welcome back to the finale of our very special Memorial Day edition of the Beaufort News. Now, Billy, just ahead of you, we talked with Dwight Hora. Dwight talked to us about military transition programs in the community. I know you've been an advocate for this for a long time.
Yeah, well, you know, we talk about the deceased, the dead, the ones who were lost, and that's what Memorial Day is all about. But I think we need to think about the many veterans who are here, those who survived. And you know, it's very disappointing that there's a disproportionate in their age group number of veterans unemployed, not able to find work, than those who didn't serve. And we in the city, working with the Low Country Economic Alliance, have actually said we should pay attention to that, because these young veterans, many of whom would like to stay in Beaufort, are a huge asset. They are the kinds of workers, they're the foundation of the kind of workers our state is going to need for the new economy.
They're the best of us.
They've been focused, they are disciplined, they've been through the earn and learn experience. But there is a necessity, as Dwight Hora has probably spoken, of blending or melding the cultures. Because a lot of these young men and women have become dependents. That's what they call them, military dependents.
It's a culture, it's a language.
It's a culture. They haven't paid insurance. They haven't paid for housing. That's been taken out. So they have to learn that when you get out, there's a different lifestyle. And while they have the core, the values, the focus, the discipline, and skills, we need to work with them and help them understand that moving into industry, there's going to be a different culture. There are going to be certain things that you're going to have to do a little differently. You're still going to be in work on time, you're still going to be part of a team, you're still going to be part of a group that is making something where there's interdependence, but you have other issues in your life as you graduate, just like someone who graduates from college, that you have to begin to think about. And so it's very important that we teach the young veterans and industry to talk the same language. So
Right.
while Memorial Day certainly honors the dead, you know, I think we need to
opportunity.
to take advantage also to think about those young veterans who are out
Absolutely.
there looking for work and what we can do for them.
Well, I know we'll be actively looking to see what we can do to better serve our veterans every day, not just on this wonderful Memorial Day.
Exactly.
Billy, an absolute pleasure having you in studio.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. For the Beaufort News, my name is Kevin Libby with WHHI. We'll be back next week with normal broadcast. Thank you so much. Goodbye.